Whiteboard series. So today for our whiteboard series, today we'll be doing a revision on plant reproduction. So for plant reproduction, we will be talking about a few topics. Firstly, what is the point of reproduction? And that is really to ensure the continuity of the next generation. Same with human repro, it is the same thing. So in plant repro, we must remember that there is a few steps that happens. So one of it is actually talking about your pollination, the first step. So pollination is the transfer. This is a must memorize thing. You have to memorize. It is what it is. So it is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flower. Okay, and we all know that the anther is the male part and the stigma, okay, sorry, I made a spelling mistake here, I'm going to correct it right now, is the female part. Okay, so while we're at it, let's draw out the typical general structure of the flowers. Now, there are generally two types of pollination that you need to learn about, and that is the two types of flower will be the wind pollinated and the animal pollinated, insect pollinated. So what are the difference? Let's talk about insect pollinated. So for insect pollinated, you typically have a very big petals. Okay, you have big petals, okay, because they serve as landing points or landing platforms. Okay, for your insects to land on. Okay, and they typically are very sweet smelling. Okay, they are very sweet smelling and they have nectar. Alright, this is to attract the insects like bees and butterflies to visit the flowers. Okay, and then what is seated inside the flowers, alright, would be your stigma. So this is your stigma. Okay, this is your petal. Now, in a bisexual flower, meaning that it contains both the male and female part, you will also have these structures, okay, with the two lobes over here. That's how you identify. These are called your anther. Okay, so take note, your anther is located below your stigma. See, your stigma is actually taller. Now the reason is so that when the pollen grains they don't fall directly on the stigma. They don't. This is to encourage cross-pollination so that the pollen grains from another flower will end up landing on the stigma. So basically, your pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from your anther to your stigma. Okay, that is what is pollination about. So after pollination, the next step comes fertilization, which I will talk in a little while. But once again, the whole idea of pollination is the transfer from where to where. You must. And this notion of transfer, you need to apply it to all concepts, including plant transport. So remember, your roots, okay, or rather your function of your water carrying tube is to transfer water from your roots to your leaves. And your food carrying tubes is basically to transfer food from your leaves to all other parts, depending on the question. So, and then also your heat. Heat always is conducted from a region of higher temperature to a region of higher temperature. gains heat from where to where. You must. you must tell me which are the two regions. Every single time there is a transfer or transport function, it is what it is. You must put that. Wind pollination, okay? Basically, you will notice that the petals are very small or even non-existent. Okay, sometimes the petal can be, it's very small, the flowers, because it doesn't need a platform. Okay, sometimes, okay, the anthers are hanging out and the stigma is also hanging out. Okay, now the reason why is this the case is because you need to compare. So basically, when it's hanging out, we say that it's easier for it to catch. Okay, it's easier for the wind. This is anther. So for the anther, it's easier. There must be a comparison word compared to the insect pollinated. Because the insect pollinated, the anther is not hanging out. Okay, so it's easier for the wind to pick up the pollen grain. Okay, and then your stigma, this is your stigma. So it is hanging out, so it is easier for the stigma to catch pollen grains in the air. Okay? Alright? So then basically, these two, okay, I don't care whether is it wind pollinated or insect pollinated. The main idea of pollination is to allow fertilization to happen. And for plants, remember, there is no such thing as sperm and eggs, don't have. This is where the male reproductive cell or male sex cells fuses with the female sex cells or reproductive cells. That's it. Full stop. Okay? And then the next thing you need to understand. This is the structure of the ovary, right? Now inside we have something known as the ovules. Okay, it looks something like this. Let me try and draw it properly as the best as I could. Pardon my horrible drawing, but I'm trying. Okay, so this whole structure here in purple, this whole thing is known as your ovary. This forms the fruit eventually. Okay, whereas each of these, this is called the ovule, is a seed. It will form the seed eventually. So if there are multiple ovules, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, eventually this fruit is going to have 6 seeds. You will have multiple seeds in it and not just one. It is what it is. So things like your mango fruit, it only has one big seed. So it means that the flower only has one ovule. Okay? I hope that I'm clear about that. Okay? After fertilization, you have the development of your fruit, right? It develops into your fruit. Then comes seed dispersal. So the whole idea of seed dispersal, I tell you, the key idea is to avoid, memorize this, avoid overcrowding, okay, to reduce competition. You cannot compete alone. Most of you will forget this. With parent plants, you must mention at least 3 of the 4 items, which I'm going to tell you. What are the 4 items? Light, water, minerals, cannot say nutrients, and space. So what is it that you cannot say? You cannot say fight for food. I'm going to put here, cannot say food, cannot say air or oxygen or carbon dioxide, because there is so much of it, it's negligible, you don't need to fight for it. Food, because the plant makes its own food, so you cannot be competing for food, it doesn't absorb food from its surrounding. Okay, and one more other thing that I forgot to add here, please also make sure that you put somewhere in your answer, it is to disperse further away from parent plants. Actually, sorry, let me backspace here. Put it here. Further away from parent plants. Okay? So then it avoids competition. So what are the three ways that we are familiar with? Okay, very quickly, I'm going to talk about it. First one is explosive action. Please be careful, it is not explosion. I've said many times, but students still will forget. So explosive action or mechanism. So for this one, right, some of the key point is that this advantage is that it's usually around and near parents. Okay, it is not very far one. Okay, so this one is disadvantage. Okay, the next thing that you need to know is that it has a pod-like structure. Okay, pod-like structure. Okay, that's how you identify. Okay, the advantage is that it does not rely on any dispersing agents such as wind or insect or animal, wind or in animals or water for dispersal, right? It doesn't need to wait for anything. It will just explode under the sun. It doesn't need to rely. So if there's no butterfly or there's no animals, there's no monkeys within the region, okay, fine, whatever. I don't need. 2, okay, where you have your water. So for water, you know that most of the plants, the young plants will grow along the river banks or the water banks. Okay, that's it at the side. Okay, you also know that usually, I'm not saying all, okay, it has a fibrous husk that traps air, okay, to help it float. Okay, next. This whole statement needs to be written down. Fibrous husk, trap air. The trap air is important. Next, the last one, which is actually wind. So for wind dispersal, usually it has some sort of wing-like structure. Okay, so it can be like feather-like, wing-like. When in doubt, just say wing-like. When in doubt but obviously if you see that it looks like a feather, but when in doubt, wing-like structure, okay, the term. Okay, so what does the wing-like structure do? It helps it stay afloat in the air longer, enabling it to travel further away from parent plants. So it is very important that you state, when you say further away from what? So this is also your carelessness. Every time when you do an experiment, you will say, oh, put the lamp further away. Put the light source further away. Further away from what? Further away from the plant. Further away from the beaker. Okay? And then on top of that, what else about wind? Okay, the dispersal pattern that it is always following the direction of the wind. Okay? So young plants grow in the direction of wind. Alright, so these are some, and then of course the stronger the wind, the further the distance it will be dispersed. These are some of the things you need to recognize. So after dispersal comes what? Germination. So germination very easy. I always teach my students W-O-W. Okay? The first W stands for water. The second W, O stands for oxygen. Sorry, quite too fast already. And then the last W stands for warmth. So please be very careful. You do not need sunlight for germination. It gets its food from the seed leaves. So during germination, okay, the seedling gets food from the seed leaves until the true leaves appear. Okay, then the true leaves will take over the function. So the seed leaves will decrease in mass because it's being used up as food by your seedlings. Okay? So basically your seedlings, right? Once the true leaves have appeared, it will drop off the seed leaf. It's that black color. You know when you have your bean sprouts, your tauge, there's the black color thing. Okay? Your seed leaves. It will drop off when the real leaves have formed. Okay? And the first thing that grows when it comes to germination, okay, is always your roots. That's the first thing that grows. And after your roots, then you have your shoots. And then finally your leaves. If it's green color, these are your true, they are called true leaves. Okay? And then the one that is giving you the nutrients, okay, somewhere over here, okay, then these are your seed leaves. Alright? Okay? And then finally, the whole cycle then repeats itself. This is roughly the summary of the key points for plant reproduction.